Good morning, everybody. Thank you for being here today. If you want to follow along, Genesis 16, Genesis chapter 16, beginning in verse number 7, and we will be covering down through verse 16 this morning. And since it's such a long passage, for the sake of time, I'm not going to read it. I hope you'll take a few moments and read over it. It is the familiar story of Hagar and her son. And Hagar is now, as we get to this place, as the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness. Hagar is a pregnant single woman, which has never been ideal in any time, in any culture. But here she is in a desperate position. And the angel comes along in verse number 9 and leads her back and takes her back to Abram and Sarah. And it's a place where all this misery began. Leads her back there, and as he does so, promises her that her son would be, her child would be a son, would be a boy, and that she would, that God had named him Ishmael. And Ishmael means God hears in verse 11. And as we look at this, we see that the people who should have been the closest, who should have been looking out for Hagar, are actually the ones who have left her completely abandoned and left her alone, and that God alone is the one who comes to her and comforts her. He hears her cries, as the Bible talks about in a number of places, that he hears our cries. And I would just say to any single mom or anyone else who at this time is feeling maybe alone, abandoned, that you may be, honestly, everyone around you. It does happen, unfortunately, that those who should be there to support us, those who should be there to lift us up, sometimes are the very ones who honestly caused the problem to begin with, but then abandon. But God, he says here, is a God who hears. And as this story goes on, it takes a little bit of a negative turn. He tells her this son is going to be like a wild donkey. And I don't think there's ever been a culture, a nation, a time when saying your son's going to be a wild donkey would give a mother much peace. That's not an encouragement or a compliment in any culture. And that his descendants are going to be wild, and they're going to bring conflict. And the truth is, the Ishmaelites were just that. They were constantly trouble for Israel, for others. And this decision that Sarah made, this selfish, faithless decision that Sarah made, has it accomplished. God used it, and it accomplished his purpose, but it has also brought about conflict and trouble throughout time. And so we're just reminded here the caution to be obedient. But in spite of that, Hagar is still, in spite of what this warning that your son's going to be a wild donkey, Hagar is touched. She is moved that God has came to her in her desperate time. And so in verse 13, we see that she names him, calls him, you are El Roi, you are the God of seeing, the God who sees. What a great comfort for you and I today to know that our God is a God who sees, a God who cares. And this passage again, one that there's all kinds of emotions and thoughts that go with this as we think about Ishmael and the trouble and this wild donkey that we read about and his descendants and everything else. And yet, in all of that, we are, I hope, we are touched by the fact that when God had an option, God had a choice here. God could have destroyed Hagar and her son. She's out in the wilderness. God could allow wild animals to consume her and eliminated a lot of grief and trouble, eliminated a problem. But instead, the God who sees is also the God who cares. And again, what a great comfort that is. And I hope this morning that whoever's watching, listening, and your circumstance is nothing like Hagar's, I guess. I guess it could be. But nonetheless, you feel abandoned, you feel deserted, you feel like everybody's turned on you, that nobody cares. You're a little bit like again, as this passage opens up with Hagar sitting off by herself by the spring of the water in the wilderness. And yet the angel of God finds her. I like that. The angel of the Lord found her. She didn't find God. The angel found her. And this morning, whatever despair, whatever difficulty or trouble you're going through, even maybe you're like Hagar and it wasn't of your making. Maybe you're like Sarah and it was your decision. You made some bad choices. Either way, He is the God who sees. Don't forget that today. Remember, He sees. He cares. You think about that. Have a good one. We'll